You can open to the book of James. It's toward the end of your Bible, James, and we're going to be looking at chapter 4, starting in verse 13. And James, as you know, was the brother of Jesus when Jesus was on the earth. And James became a pastor at Jerusalem there, the largest church, where the first church was born at Pentecost. And he was a pastor there and a leader there. And then he became a martyr. He died proclaiming the truth of who Jesus said he was and what he did. And so that we have a lot to learn from James. And James is in the genre of wisdom literature, meaning that there's a lot of wisdom to be gained. I got a beard hair. That's gross. Okay. Got that taken care of. We're back on track. Anyways, what was I talking about, Bob? James. James is wisdom literature, and we have a lot to learn from James. He's very practical. When he talks, we listen because he's talking about the simple things in life and the nitty-gritty of the everyday. And this is going to be, I hope, a very, very practical sermon. But I got a question for you, and you can just, answer in your mind and think about it in your mind. What's your plan for this afternoon? Just think about it. Think about it. What's your plan for this afternoon? Got it? What's your plan for this evening? Okay. What's your plan for tomorrow? Got a plan for tomorrow, I'm assuming? What's your plan for Thursday? How about next Sunday? What's your plan for July 4th? What's your plan for your wedding anniversary this summer, maybe? What's your plan for Christmas? Where would you like to be this time next year? Where would you like to be this time 10 years from now? You see, all of us have dreams, hopes, aspirations, visions. That's how the world works. That's how the world works because God made the world, and God has dreams, God has hopes, God has aspirations, God has visions, and He plans His life accordingly to bring those things about. So too do you and I have hopes and aspirations and dreams, and then what happens is we make plans to move ourselves towards accomplishing those hopes, dreams, aspirations. And you can always tell what's important to someone because what's important to someone is that thing that gets a plan. That's why when I'm working with husbands and wives, the wife can intuitively know whether or not she's being loved and valued by her husband by whether or not he makes a plan to love and value her. So the husband can say, oh yeah, I'm a Christian, I love you, and my job is to serve you and sacrificially and provide for you and protect you and lead you spiritually and blah, 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 blah. But what he makes plans for is his career advancement. Or what he makes plans for is his hobby advancement. Or he makes plans for is fill in the blank. And then she looks at it and she goes, you know what? You're all talk, no action because I see you say the right things, but what I see you do is make plans for things that really matter for you, to you, which is everything but me. Or vice versa, a wife to husband. Because we make plans for things that matter to us, okay? And so I'm just asking you, what do you dream about? What are your values? What are your visions? What are your aspirations? And what are you making plans towards currently? Some of you just got out of school and your plan is to get a job. You got debt you got to pay off, and you got to get into the workforce. Some of you got a job and you want to get married. That's your aspiration. So you're making plans to make that happen, man. You're online and you're here fishing even now. Are they by themselves? Lunch after church. Go for it. I affirm that. You do that. Some of you are married and you want to have kids. That's a dream aspiration. Some of you have kids, and you're like, whoa, we wanted it, we got it, now what do we do with them? And so now you're making a plan to deal with that. Or your kids are ready to leave the home, and so you're making plans to launch them. Or they've left, and now you're making plans to downsize and do the empty nester thing, or whatever it may be. Maybe your dreams and aspirations are related to your career or related to relationships. Maybe there's broken relationships that you're wanting to mend and bring reconciliation towards. I don't know what your dreams or plans or aspirations are, but those are all good things because we've been made in the image of God. And when we stop hoping and stop dreaming and stop aspiring, we're dead. It's sickness. It's called depression. If you didn't have dreams, aspirations, hopes, why would you get up out of bed in the morning? So dreams, aspirations, and hopes are a very important part of life here on God's earth. Now, when we go to fulfill those dreams, aspirations, and goals, we're all wired differently and different personalities, and some are better at making lists, and some are better at executing, and some are better at thinking things through. But we can go to the world oftentimes for help, and that's not a bad thing because where truth is to be found, God's grace is present because all truth is God's truth. So a non-believer can be exercising and walking in a principle of God, and it be bearing fruit in their life because they're living in line with the world God made and how He made it to work. So there's much common grace in the world to learn from. But oftentimes we go to the area of business. We go, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, Stephen Covey, or we go to, I think, Robert Allen's book, Get Things Done, or we go, From Good to Great, or whatever it may be, and we go and we start gleaning tips and techniques of how to be a more effective person, and those are all good, right, fine, and true. However, we need to be careful where we go to get counsel because there are different kinds of counsel. There's ungodly counsel, meaning that counsel is in antithesis to the counsel of God. It's telling you to do something. It's encouraging you to pursue something. It's pointing you in a direction that would be completely opposite of what God would tell you to do, God would tell you to want, and God would tell you to go. That's ungodly counsel that if you give ear to, will not take you down a good road. You can waste a lot of time, a lot of years, a lot of life on the wrong road from ungodly counsel, pursuing the same values the world says are most important. There's also godless counsel. I mean, it's not so much like antithetical to God, and it just doesn't have any God in it. It's godless. Your hopes, your aspirations, your dreams, your desires, what you want to do, you. It's not that it's like necessarily giving you bad advice. It just simply doesn't take God into the equation, which is by definition bad advice. Then there's the God-like counsel. You know, you read it and it's like, oh, it kind of gives a head nod to spirituality and make sure you take care of your spiritual life. And, you know, it's kind of like, you know, the fortune cookie kind of stuff, you know, and it's got a quote from a great religious leader thrown in for good measure, you know, and make sure to cultivate your spirituality, whatever that is. And so it's kind of God-like, right? We want to get godly, God-full counsel for how we live life. And so here in this last sermon I get to preach to you from the book of James, I think this is an appropriate word for us to consider. So James chapter 4, we'll begin in verse 13, because what James is going to do for us is he's going to answer some very, very fundamental questions to life. Because the three fundamental questions of life that every person is answering and moving towards or trying to answer is, where have I come from, why am I here, and where am I going? How you answer those questions will shape decisions you make, things you hold as value, heroes you pick to emulate, and goals you set to accomplish. Why am I here, or where have I come from? Why am I here? Where am I going? If you don't know where you came from, if you don't know why you're here, if you don't know where you're going, you won't know what to do. And so James is going to be very helpful for us here, Pastor James, in answering for us some pretty important questions when it comes to answering the question, life is what? Number one, life is uncertain. Look at chapter 4, verse 13. Come now, you who say, today or tomorrow we will go into such and such a town and spend a year there and trade and make a profit, yet you do not know what tomorrow will bring. James was listening to, commentators think, the Palestinian and the Hellenistic Jews, successful businessmen and women, entrepreneurs, you know what I mean, running big corporations, making tons of money, go, small business, local business, big business, they're in it, they're making things happen, they're producing products, they're moving products, they're thinking, you know, market things, they're getting ahead of the curve. He's like, none of that is wrong. The problem here is when you begin talking in such a way as if you're sure of what you're going to accomplish because you're in control. How many of you have absolute certainty as to the details of what will happen in the world or in your life next month? Nobody? There's over 850 people walk through these doors and not one person raised their hand on that question so far. Really? How many of you know with absolute certainty what will happen in the world or just in your life tomorrow? How many of you know with absolute certainty what will happen in your life this afternoon? How many of you know with absolute certainty you'll live through the end of this message? You just don't. You just don't. Life is profoundly uncertain. And if that uncertainty doesn't factor into your worldview, then James is saying you're walking a path of foolishness. Because you're walking a path that says, I am self-sovereign. I have sovereignty over my world, and things can go to hell in a handbasket, but I can control my circumstances. I will watch me. And James is like, that's a fool. Self-sovereignty and the air of it will cause you to do a couple things. First of all, it will cause you to be driven by wealth and materialism. Look what James says. Come on now, you who say, oh, today or tomorrow we will go into such and such a town and spend a year there, and we're going to trade, and we're going to make a profit. Now, is there anything wrong with making a profit? No. Is there anything wrong with business success? Not at all. James is saying, just don't act like you have the sovereign power to make it happen. He's listening here to the successful business people in his church, and they're talking with this presumptuous, arrogant pride, and he's like, I'm all for you making plans, but don't act as if you can make them happen. Because life is uncertain, and it's foolish for you to think that the plans you make, you can bring about by your own power. You don't even know why your heart's still beating. Don't become arrogant and don't become presumptuous in your business plans, James says. Secondly, self-sovereignty can put you at the center of the universe. It can take your life, your dreams, your plans, your aspirations, and it can put it at the center of the universe. And the one place you can never be is the center of the universe, even if it's yours. And this error of forgetting that life is uncertain and believing that you're self-sovereign can cause you to think you live in the center of the universe. Paul David Tripp tells a great story of a birthday party for his kids. He had a bunch of friends over and their kids, and they were celebrating the party, and the kid whose birthday was at the end of the table, and he was going to open up his presents, and there was a kid at the other end of the table whose birthday it was not, but whose presents he wanted, and he was crying because he couldn't open those presents. And it was kind of cute at first, and then it kind of grew, and it went from cute to ugly, pretty quick, and like about that fast. And you've been there, parents. And so finally, it got so embarrassing and so disruptive to the party, and the one of the moms came over, and and Paul says she turned the chair around, and she got down on her knees, and she said, Johnny, looking right in the eyes, 4 or 5 years old, Johnny, this isn't your party. No truer words were ever spoken. Because you see, when we see it in the life of a child, we see it for what it is, foolish childishness. But when we see it in our life as an adult, we call it ambition. Because we're more sophisticated in our sinning now. But no truer words were ever spoken. This life, this universe, this world, it's not your party. It's just not your party. You got invited to it, to participate in it, but don't make the profound error of thinking that because you got invited to it, all of a sudden it became about you. It's not your party. Self-sovereignty can cause us to be driven by materialism and wealth. It can cause us to make the error of putting ourselves at the center of the universe, and it can cause us to overreach. If you're a driver, if you're a leader, if you're a visionary, you know anybody like that? I happen to think they're very helpful people to have around. But the problem can come when that driver, that visionary, that leader starts thinking and acting and speaking as if the future is certain and sure because of what they're going to do to bring it about. Now, visionaries and leaders and entrepreneurs get people to follow them because of that certainty, and that is a good thing. They have the gift of faith for the future. That's a good thing. However, when that leader begins to think, or the people following him begin to think that leader can bring about the certainty of that future, that's a profound error. And that leader will begin overreaching because they think they're sovereign and control, and they've forgotten that life is uncertain. But not only will the error of self-sovereignty come into play when you forget life is uncertain, you'll walk into the error of separation. Meaning you'll separate the things that are holy from the things that are just normal in life. The things that are secular and the things that are sacred. Meaning you'll build categories in your life and you'll build firewalls between godly things and then just things that don't matter to God but really matter to me. That doesn't exist in God's world. There aren't things that really matter to God and then things He doesn't care about. It's all of Christ for all of life. As believers, we don't walk through our days thinking there are some things that God cares about and then other things He doesn't. There are some things that I need His help with and there are other things that I think I got this one on my own. It's all of Christ for all of life. You look at the life of Jesus. It's so profound. And the Bible says that Jesus glorified God on earth in everything that He did. And yet we only have 3 years of recorded ministry that He did. The first 30 years were spent as a carpenter. Yet Jesus came fully man, fully God, and everything he did perfectly and completely and continually and only and always glorified the Father in everything that he did, and he only did ministry for 3 years. It's not as if Jesus didn't glorify God for the first 30 years as a carpenter and then started glorifying God after he started preaching. It's not as if when Jesus was casting out demons, he was glorifying God, and when he was resting or taking a nap, he wasn't glorifying God. Jesus was glorifying God all of the time in every way with all that he did, because it's all of life matters to God. And it's been a profound exercise for me to think through the fact that Jesus healed a lot of people and he didn't heal a lot of people. Jesus talked with a lot of folks and didn't talk with a lot of folks. Jesus met with a lot of people and didn't meet with a lot of people. Jesus taught a lot and he didn't teach as much as he could have. 6 accounts in the Gospels alone. Different accounts of him going away for solitude and silence to be alone, to recharge, because he was in a human body with limitations that he recognized. And so he worked to the glory of God, he played to the glory of God, he rested to the glory of God. It's not as if he started glorifying God when he stopped swinging a hammer. And so if you're in your cubicle at work going, well, you know, when we can retire and go be a missionary or build houses for poor people in Africa, then I'll serve God. Until now, I got to gut it out. No. Start glorifying God in your cubicle tomorrow, because all of life matters, and we're called to do all of life to the glory of God. I mean, we do it in such a way that demonstrates that we believe life is uncertain, but God holds the future. We believe that life matters. And little things matter to a God who is present and who cares. And so we give details, and we give excellence to the details, and we give effort to things no one else to see, because we're accountable to God, not man. You live in such a way as to glorify God 24/7 in work, rest, or play, just like Jesus did. Which means you don't separate things that, oh, this is my spiritual stuff, and this is just my own stuff. I'll go to church on Sunday, do the spiritual thing, and then Monday I'm going to go to this town, stay there for a year, and make a ton of money, baby, and I'll tithe it, but I'm going to make a ton of money. Like, no, the firewall that we create is a false firewall. It does not exist. God cares about both worlds, because it's one world. It's his. So the first thing we learn from the apostle and the pastor, James, is that life is uncertain. Jesus rules over all the nations. He rules over all cultures, all history, and he rules over your life. And James is saying, don't live like an atheist while you go to church. Second thing we learn from James is that not only is life uncertain, but life is short. Look at verse 13. Come now, you who say, today or tomorrow we will go into such and such a town and spend a year there and trade and make a profit. Yet you do not even know what even tomorrow will bring. What is your life? Now, there's the question. James, the first existential philosopher, right? There's the question. What is your life? And how you answer that question will by default, unconsciously even, orient you and move you down certain roads. What is your life, he says, for you are a mist that appears for a little time and then vanishes. Because life is short, James is saying. Don't live under the delusion that it's long and you got all sorts of time on your hands. It's a vapor's breath, and then you're gone. I walked out on our property this week to do a little work and getting ready for what we got coming, and was out there early to get us started on some things, and I had to cut some trees down, do some burning, and so I got out there early, and I stepped out of my truck. It was kind of during that cold snap, and I stepped out of my truck, and guess what I saw? My breath. And I knew I was preaching the sermon on life being a vapor's breath, and I was like, oh, cool. And you know what really hit me in a new, profound way on a, I don't know what it was, a Thursday, Friday morning out at my ground? Vapor dissipates really quickly. And I'm out there all excited to work my property, kind of depressed. So I'm like, I'm looking at a tree that's older than me. I think it's a 110-year-old tree. That tree's gone through 4 or 5 farmers, and it'll go through me, and it'll still be here unless I cut it down. Because my life's a vapor's breath. So I'm out there like, And I'm like, I'm like, man, this is depressing. Because life is short. And then you stand before the Creator to give an account. If God gives you 90 years, it'll go like that. And then your opportunity to live not by sight but by faith will be gone, and you'll have sight, no faith needed. And God will be there saying either, well done, good and faithful servant, or He'll be saying, depart from me, I don't know who you are. And if you live as if life is certain, not uncertain, and life is long and not short, you'll walk down a foolish road. Then you'll wake up at some point, Lord willing, going, goodness sakes, what have I done? I've wasted my life. Oldest woman on record died it's almost a month now ago, I guess. USA Today article. They ask her, what's it been like to live for 117 years? I mean, this lady was like around when the Titanic sunk. Okay? We're talking like a long time ago, What's it been like to live that long? And she said, or, what's your observation about life? She goes, it's gone by kind of fast. That's wisdom from a 117-year-old woman saying, if I could give you one piece of advice at 117, it would be, it goes by really fast. Now, if you grew up with that old aunt that just kind of, come in and, you grew up so fast, and you're like, get off me, she's a crazy woman, you know what I mean? You wait. You'll become that crazy woman. If you're a woman. If you're a guy, don't become a crazy woman. That's very complicated. But you'll become that old uncle that married that crazy woman. Oh, I remember when you were, yeah. No, I'm saying those things now. And I'm 35. I'm turning into an old man. I'm like, oh, Ben, I remember when you were, and I'm just like, oh, stop that. It's just inevitable. There's nothing new under the sun. Says the author of Ecclesiastes, there's nothing new under the sun. The problem is when you live life under the sun as if there's no one above the sun. That's the problem. Because there's nothing new down here. Men, women grow up, sin against each other, make a lot of money, fail miserably, break people, make mistakes, have some wins, and then they die. Life is uncertain and it's short. Don't live like it's certain and long. That would be foolishness. Life is a vapor's breath. But see, we don't get this kind of teaching or instruction in our schools today. There's not a class at Wenatchee High School called Life 101 where you walk in and the teacher says, okay, people, life is very uncertain. You don't know if you'll make it to your senior year or not. You don't know if you'll make it to the end of this day. And life is short. Therefore, live for the things that matter most. Don't ignore God. Don't trivialize the ultimate reality, who is reality. Don't dribble your days away running with your peers off cliffs like lemmings. Don't be stupid or foolish or live for the moment. Don't capitalize these high school years by, live with wisdom, children. Live with purpose, children. Live with responsibility. Live as those who have a lot to learn. Ask a lot of questions. Seek wise counsel. Be intentional. Be urgent. Be careful. Be thoughtful in these days. Build a foundation that you can stand on that will be helpful in 20 years if, Lord willing, you make it 20 years. Because life is uncertain and it's short. Make the most of it while you're here. That class doesn't exist at Wenatchee High School. Or Eastmont for that matter. An historian noted, I was reading this week, the profound observation that Western civilization is the first civilization in the history of humanity that doesn't tell its people why they're here or where they're going. It doesn't. It says live for the here and now, nothing above the sun, get what you can while you can. Because if eternity isn't real, then it makes the most sense to get the most sex, the most money, the most power, the most privilege, the most affluence, the most comfort possible, because once you're gone, you're just gone. If eternity isn't real, that matters how you live your life. But if eternity is real, that too matters to how you live your life. Death is coming. I've done 2 suicide funerals, a funeral of my grandma, and the funeral of an 8-week-old baby in the last 12 months. And I'm telling you, death is coming. When you least expect it, I'm going to be dead and be worm food in just a short amount of time. I know for a fact this is the last sermon I get to preach out of James, but it might be the last sermon I ever preach in my life. I don't know if I'm coming back this fall. I want to, I plan to, I intend to, I'm excited to, but I might get hit by a bus walking home from church today. We just don't know. Now, I'm not saying this to be a discouragement. I'm saying it to be an encouragement, because if you're hearing my voice, there is still time to repent and turn and live as if life is uncertain and short and God holds tomorrow, and you can be intentional with how you live your life. Man, if you've ever had the privilege of walking with someone who's old and dying, or young and dying and know they're dying, like we get to do as pastors often, it has this uncanny effect on your perspective that just hones it down to a razor-sharp point. Because all of a sudden, the reality of pending death gives profound clarity to the stuff that we thought was important before death became real. And so you spend time talking with my grandma, and you have weird conversations with people that know they're going to die. You just do. It's weird. You just might as well get it on the table and talk about it, because it's coming. And I have yet to have a conversation with a dying person who has said, Pastor Josh, can you go into the study and bring me my trophies from high school so I can look at them one more time? Nobody. Should you try hard in high school? Sure. Get her trophies? Whatever. We pulled a huge box, well, like 4 boxes out of the garage with trophies of my wife. And I'm like, honey, look at these. And I'm like, these are cool. Let's put them in the house. And she's like, no, let's not put them in the house. Why? Because they don't matter. They just don't. I've never sat with one dying person who's been like, Pastor Josh, could you roll me a little closer to the window? Sure, why? I just want to catch one last glimpse of my boat. Nobody. Now, if it happens, I'll tell you, and you can change your whole worldview, but it hasn't happened yet. Atheists or Christians all have a different perspective on the threshold of eternity. I haven't had one person yet. Josh, could you go in my desk and bring me the org chart just so I can see how far up the pecking order I made it? Oh, yeah. Josh, could you bring me my resume? Oh, look at that beauty. Nobody. Because people who die have regrets when they realize they cared about the wrong things. And God's word to you this morning is a means of grace to wake you up to the things that matter, so that when you die, your regrets are limited, not maximized. Because people and memories are the only thing you get to take into eternity. And if all you take into eternity are people you hurt and memories of brokenness that you caused, see, James is loving us here this morning by saying, hey, idiot, life is uncertain and it's short. That's a means of grace to you this morning. But not only is life uncertain and short, life is in God's hands. Come now, you who say, today or tomorrow we will go into such and such a town and spend a year there and make trade and make a profit, yet you do not even know what tomorrow will bring. What is your life? For you are a mist, a vapor's breath that appears for a little time and then vanishes. Instead, you ought to say, if the Lord wills, we will live and do this or that. James isn't even so much concerned with the details of what you do. He's concerned with the motivation and the worldview underneath what's driving what you do and how you do it. Is James against planning? Is James saying planning is a sin, forecasting is a sin, looking ahead is a sin, scheduling and preparing to be ready for things that are coming is a sin? Is that what he's saying? He's saying, no, you should just trust God, sit back, and que sera, sera. What will be, let her come. No. Listen to how the Proverbs put it. Proverbs 6. Go to the ant, O sluggard, consider her ways and be wise. Without having any chief, any officer, or any ruler, she prepares her food in summer and gathers her sustenance in harvest. Meaning, hey fool, hey sluggard, go to the ant that has a brain the size, of a ant. Couldn't figure out where to go with something that was smaller, so we just stuck with the analogy. Ants aren't building rocket ships. Ants aren't building nuclear plants, and yet they have the wisdom to look ahead, see a need coming, and without a chief or a CEO or a boss or a naggy mom or dad in their ear, they take steps to plan accordingly. That's not foolish or ungodly. That's wise and godly, the proverb says. Or Proverbs 14:15. The simple believes everything, but the prudent looks where he is going. Proverbs 15:22. Without counsel, plans go wrong, but with many advisors, they succeed. Are plans wrong? No. Just make sure they have many advisors and godly input so they'll succeed in a way that matters. Proverbs 16:3. Commit your work to the Lord, and your plans will be established. Is work wrong? No. Is succeeding wrong? No. Is making money wrong? No. Is moving the ball forward and being productive wrong? No. Is making plans wrong? No. Just make sure that your plans are submitted to the Lord, the Proverbs say. Proverbs 24:27, prepare your work outside, get everything ready for you in the field, and after that, build your house. In other words, make a plan, stage it out. Proverbs 31, she rises while it is yet night and provides food for her household and tasks for her maidens. She considers a field and buys it. With the fruit of her hands, she plants a vineyard. She makes plans. And the biggest argument for the rightness of making plans comes from the nature of God himself. The ultimate reason we plan is that God's a planner. And we're made in his image. And good things came about when God planned. God is not up there responding to everything with like this knee-jerk response to stimuli. Rather, he's making a plan. He's being deliberate to bring the plan about. Listen to Isaiah 46:9. I am God, there is no other. I am God, and there is none like me. Declaring the end from the beginning, and from ancient times things not yet done, saying, my counsel will stand, and I will accomplish my purpose. Or Ephesians 1:9. God has made known to us in all wisdom and insight the mystery of his will, according to his purpose which he set forth in Christ as a plan for the fullness of time to unite all things in heaven and things on earth. See, God had a plan, and it's a good plan, and he took decisive steps to execute the plan for your good and his glory. Or Acts 2, verse 23. This Jesus was delivered up to Pontius Pilate, to death on a cross, according to the definite plan and foreknowledge of God. Meaning God does not walk through life haphazardly. He walks through life with great intention, governing all things to bring about his plan. Therefore, having been made in the image of God, it is a very godlike thing when we are filled with the Spirit to look towards dreams and aspirations and visions and make a plan to decisively execute or to decisively get there as we execute the plan. So James is not saying, stop making plans, stop dreaming dreams, stop having holy ambitions, stop striving for things, and just kind of let life grab you by the scruff of the neck and drag you through it. Not at all. What he's saying is the great error of the fool is not that they don't make plans, but rather that they make plans without God. They make plans centered around themselves rather than plans centered around God. My plans, my dreams, my aspirations, my visions, my goals, my ambitions, rather than what is God's heart, what is God's vision, what is God's ambition, what is God's desire and plan for my life. And there's a line here, because what I don't want to do is create a ton of people who are like fearful of the will of God. There are some very clear things God has given you to be about. Athanasius said, love Jesus, do whatever you want. Very simplified version of saying, when you're loving Jesus more and more and more, what you want to do will be what he wants you to do. So the error here is not in the making of the plans. The error is in the making of the plans without God in the equation. James is saying life is uncertain, life is short, the future is in God's hands. Therefore, rather than being afraid of the future, we can move into the future with courageous boldness or bold humility. Because, see, Christians should be the most bold, humble people on the planet. We're bold because we know who holds the future, and we're humble because we know who holds the future. So there's this unshakable, tethered to a rock, boldness that says we can make plans and dream dreams, and we know who holds the future. So we love Jesus. We know what He's called us to do. So by God's grace, we're going to run as hard as we can. And if the Lord wills, we'll do these things and thank the Lord that our plans aren't as glorious as His plans, and that He will redirect our plans when they get off step. So we're going forward with boldness here. No one will make mistakes. No one will mess up. No one will fail. But He holds the future, so look out. And yet there's a marked humility in that as well. I'm not even sure if I'll be breathing air tomorrow. But I know Jesus will be alive, and His kingdom will be advancing whether I'm pushing in the sled or not. So there's a level of humility that marks our life too. Boldness and humility, the mark of the believer. And this should probably be in our language a little more. I know it's cliche. I know it's this Christian bumper sticker. And if you don't know me, well, this is your lucky day. I hate bumper stickers. If you come to be a member here, we're going to check the back of your car. And if it's got a Christian bumper sticker on it, it's coming off. Those things drive me nuts. I mean, there's very, very few bumper stickers that encapsulate good theology. Most of them are trite and silly and goofy and, look out, God's my co-pilot. Really? That's a bummer. I think you'd prefer being the pilot and you being in the back seat. Shut it up. You know what I mean? So it's like very few bumper stickers that really do it for me. No, I don't, Grace and Pastor Adam, he's a loving guy. So go to him. He'll probably let you keep your bumper sticker. I don't think he likes bumper stickers either, but this is a side tangent right now. She says get him out. Anyway, the point being, I don't want this to become a cliche in our church. Well, if the Lord wills, you come to church. Hey, can I sit there? Can you move so I can sit there? Well, if the Lord wills, I'll stand up and move. Hey, if the Lord wills, I might not break your nose with my Bible for saying the Lord wills so much. So let's not have it become this Christian cliche, but let's let it become a deep, abiding conviction. And so it's in my language. It's good to say and it's good to hear. Yeah, we're excited to build a house for LMA this summer, Lord willing. Now, that can be this lame cliche, or it can be birthed from a place of deep conviction. Yeah, we're hoping to build LMA's house this year. We're calling it LMA's house. The house for LMA. Lord willing, if I'm alive in June, that's a good perspective for me to work from. It's a good perspective for you to work from because you'll live life completely differently. Therefore, because life is uncertain and life is short and God holds the future, He says, give your best time to the best things. Look at verse 16. As it is, you boast in your arrogance. All such boasting is evil. You assert certainty about the future. You assert that you have a long time to accomplish it. You think you hold the future, not God, and you boast about it, and God's saying that's not just error or off, that's evil. Because you're living a life that isn't taking the greatest reality in the universe into consideration. That's the very definition of evil. That's what Adam and Eve did in the garden that started this whole mess. I'm God, not Him. I'm going to boast in my strength and my wisdom because I think I know I have a better way to do it. So step aside, God. I'm eating the fruit you said not to eat because I think it'll be better for me. That's the great assertion that got us into the mess that we're in today. It's not just off, it's evil. And then what does He say? So whoever knows the right thing to do and fails to do it, for him it is a sin. This is very, very interesting. Because life is uncertain, because life is short, because God holds the future, James is saying, give your best time to the best things. And that will be different for you than it is for me. James is speaking here, I believe, of the sin of omission. If you know what to do and you fail to do it, for you, that is sin. Meaning, there are theological categories given here by theologians. There are sins of commission, things you shouldn't do but do. Adultery, fornication, idolatry, stealing, lying, cheating, all these things over here, right? And then there's the sins of omission, things you should do but don't. So not only is it a sin to tell a lie, it is also an equal sin to know the truth and not speak it. It is a sin to slander a brother or sister or someone you don't even know. It is just as much of a sin to see someone hurting or under attack and not step up and be a friend to them. And so there are things that we sin in doing what we should not, and ways we sin in not doing things we should. And for Everyone here, it'll be different. Now, we start with God's Word. We start with the revealed will of God in doing what we know He's called us to do. But within that, there is a wide variety of possibilities that will be different for you than it will be for me. For instance, I preach every sermon in light of the reality of telling myself this might be my last. And people are like, man, why are you so fired up all the time? Because I don't know if that's the last shot I got with someone out there or with the opportunities I have. And so you talk to Pastor Adam, Pastor Kent, anybody who's preached at all, and there comes with that act of preaching a burden to speak in a way that makes Jesus look good and true and beautiful, because you don't know if that's the last shot you get to talk about Him. And so there should be on the life of the preacher, rolling off the man speaking for God, if he is to be helpful and right and true, there should be rolling off that man's life the aroma of eternity. If not, he will not be helpful to you, because he's lying about realities, things like you're going to die. And if you're not living in light of that reality, you're not living in reality. And so people say, man, I'm so fired up because I don't know that's the last shot I got with someone out there in the back row. They might not ever come back, and I got one shot to tell them that Jesus is good and glorious and lovely and powerful and strong and present and near and died for their sins and is inviting them to place their faith in Him, that they might know forgiveness and freedom and joy and acceptance by the Father through the work of the Son. There's rescue and healing and wholeness for that person available if they would only hear the good news about it. We got to get this perspective if we're going to walk through life in a helpful way for the people lost around us. Now, I don't have any notes beyond this because I told myself I'm going to shoot from the hip my last sermon. So buckle up. No, I'm kidding. For me, I work with concentric circles. I'm a child of God. I'm a Christian. I'm a husband of Sharon. I'm a father to my kids. I'm a pastor at Grace City Church. And I work out from those concentric circles because there are specific things that God is calling you to do that if you're not paying attention to them and obeying them, you'll be in sin. When Sharon said, when God spoke to me through my helper in a hotel room in Minneapolis, when are you going to start doing full-time, with your time, what God put you on this planet to do? And it's not sell real estate, and it's not chase bad guys, and it's not pursue their careers. It's to preach the Word of God and to plant a local church. When are you going to start doing that? And I knew in that moment, two roads were converging before us. One road would continue on the road of making six figures and establishing my business, and I'd been in it 3 years, and the fourth year is when it really popped, and it had been popping well for 3 years, and so the fourth year was going to be the big one. That's just around the corner if we stay on this road. This road, sell our home, move into someone's basement, remodel someone else's basement, go to school. You keep working, take a massive cut in pay because there is no pay, lots of uncertainty, lots of unknowns. To me, who can't see around the corner, but I'm listening to God who's up above the sun, looking down and sees what's around the corner, it's not actually as dangerous as I think. And so when God spoke to me through my helpmate, which He will to you, men, if you're listening, I thought, well, we got a choice to make. And for us, we knew that for us not to go back and plant a church would be sin. Very clear to me. Now, for other folks, not to plant a church isn't sin, it's obedience. But for me, for him, it would have been sin not to do it. What's that for you? So for me, I'm just working with my concentric circles. And as a Christian, I want to hear the Word of God and hear the voice of God and discern the voice of God and love Him more than I love anyone else. Because if I love you first as a pastor, more than I love God first, and being a pastor becomes my identity, I won't serve you, I'll use you to bolster my identity. Pastors use people all the time. I get my strokes from what you think of me, so I'm going to talk about God in such a way that makes you like me. Now I'm using you to bolster my identity. I'm not serving you. And so if I ever get to the place where I love being a pastor more than I love being a child of God, I'm going to have problems, and you should leave. So being a child of God and learning to hear and love and discern the voice of God and working from that place of deep, deep rest. And then as a husband to Sharon, I mean, I've been thinking that through, and I got a list of stuff I wrote down that I want to work on as a husband. And one of the things as a child of God that I haven't resolved is this desire. I have dreams and passions and ambitions and desires to do more things than the circumstances that God's given me and my family will allow. And that's a tension I feel every morning I wake up, and it bugs me. And I got to resolve that. I got to wrestle with it. That's my thing. That's my thing. And as a husband, God's been showing me very clear that I have expectations of Sharon that are unreasonable, unrealistic, and unsustainable. And because she's a woman of great character and capacity, and because she's a great hard worker, she's risen to those expectations at the expense of her health. Because her thing is to perform and to please, and we talk about that often. It's not hard for her to sacrifice herself for the sake of my expectations. That's my deal. That's wrong. I've had unrealistic and unsustainable expectations for Sharon. I've had unrealistic and unsustainable expectations for myself. As a father, as I've been looking at life, I get one shot with my kids and then they're gone. There is no plan B with my kids. I'm it. There's no backstop. There's no alternative option. I'm it. And if I screw it up, it's gone. The church isn't plan B for your kids. The school system isn't plan B for your kids. You're plan A. There is no other plan for your kids. Which means I got to be there for them when it matters. I got to be there for them when they have questions. I got to reorient my life so I can love my children the way that God's called me to. And then as a pastor, I've been reflecting and recalibrating and upon my life as a pastor, and I'm recognizing I have had unrealistic and unsustainable expectations and patterns of living in my life as a pastor that won't serve me well in the long run, nor you in the long run. And it's God's grace that they're being pointed out and shown to me, and there's men in my life who love me and aren't impressed by me and stand up to me and look me in the eye and sit me down and have a squared conversation in the face, and I buck and push and kick and argue and beat them down, and they go away and heal up and come back and try it again, and we get to a place where I begin seeing the wisdom, and then they call in bigger guns, and I start, more voices, and they gang up on me, and then I finally wake up to go, hey, maybe I'm not as smart as I thought I was. Maybe I'm actually stupid and foolish. And the analogy I gave in first service is like I'm like a rocket ship, because when you do analogies about yourself, you always put them in really, masculine, strong analogies. So I'm like a rocket ship, you know what I mean? Strong, steel, hot, and this rocket ship's taking off the ground, and the big rockets and gas tanks strapped on the side, sitting up at the top, and full throttle forward, when power and starts taking up, and then smoke and fire, and it starts arcing out of the sky. Everyone's like, wow, watching this thing go, and that's my life. And it's up, and the purpose of all the gas tanks and rockets is to give enough inertia and to get the rocket out of or beyond the gravitational pull of the Earth, right? And out of the atmosphere into where it can get orbit, right? And so I'm going, and pretty soon, Sharon's like, hey, Josh. My kids are like, hey, Dad. When Pastor Ken and Pastor Aaron are like, Josh! And they're all young, trying to get my attention. I'm like, shut up! I think if we stay on the gas, we can maybe find the new galaxy nobody else has found. Hang on, here we go. And I'm thinking, let's blow through the first orbit, and maybe we can find a galaxy no one's yet found because they let off the gas too soon. Isn't this going to be awesome? Woo! Tiles are peeling off the side of the ship. And they're like, dear God, somebody get his hand off the throttle before he kills himself. Boom! And I go knock out, and they... that's what it's like to be around me sometimes. I'm not saying that in a complimentary way to myself. It's really not. Yeah. So I got some things I got to grow in. Because I can give you the analogy, but in the bottom of my heart, I still kind of like being a rocket ship, to be honest. I'm like, it's kind of fun. And yet there's a very real possibility I burn myself out or those around me out. And that's not a good legacy. That's not wisdom. That's foolishness. Life is urgent. Run hard, work hard, but don't act as if you're God or as if he'll be in trouble if you're not around. Because my guess is the church and the kingdom of God won't even miss a beat the day I go on sabbatical. Really? Like a water and a finger of a bucket of water, you know what I mean? Finger, pull it out, same as always. I was talking to a pastor last week, and he said it takes 4 days to deliver a sermon, 2 days to get it, 1 day to deliver it, 1 day to recover from it. I thought, well, whoops, missed that. I've collapsed that in 2 days. 1 day to stressfully prepare it, 1 day to deliver it like your hair's on fire, and then no recover and keep right on running. That's what I've been doing for 7 years. And I don't see a problem with that sometimes. Until I look around and everyone's like, water. You know, I'm like, what? And then I'm like that way myself, but refuse to admit it. So there's lots. I'm 35, I'm young. I got a lot to learn. And I want to learn those lessons early so to minimize the damage of my own gifting that becomes a liability, really. When it's not reigned under the Spirit of God and living out the worldview of God. Life is uncertain. Life is really short. God controls the future. So give your best time to things that matter most. And so my challenge to you is, what is that thing in your life? I don't know what it is. I came back from December frustrated, life in a tizzy, tired, exhausted, worn out, and I had 3 things I knew beyond the shadow of a doubt that unless I did them, it'd be sin for me. And Adam could tell you what they were. I got 3 letters, they all match, and I got to fix this, this, and this, or I'm not leading my home well. And so that's what I'm going to do. What is it for you? And the word the Lord gave me in January that I'm bringing to you now as a church is, get your home in order, church. I've been hammering my staff on that, talking to the elders about that. They're talking to me about that. What's that one thing? What's those 2 things in your life that only you can do that need your attention, that God's saying if you were to not do these things, it would be sin for you to get your home in order? What is that for you? A broken relationship, unsustainable patterns of life, work, rest, play, right? 3 gifts given by God, all good under the sun, given by him as a gift, but become destructive when they become idols. So is your idol work, you don't rest or play well? Is your idol play, you don't rest or work well? Is your idol rest, you don't work or play at all? What's your thing? Because work can be playful and full of rest when you're doing it to the glory of God. There can be play that's productive and restful. And there can be rest that can be fun and accomplishing a lot if it's done to the glory of God. But taking it on its own as an idol becomes destructive to you and those around you. So what's your one thing that God's put in your heart right now? Spirit of God, speak to the people in this room even as I'm speaking. Impress upon the men and women who hear my voice that one, those 2 things you're calling them to be about to get their own home in order this summer. What is that thing for you? God's pressing it on your mind and heart even now, and for you to walk out of this room and to ignore it and not do it, for you that'd be sin. Because God's calling you in light of the uncertainty of life and the shortness of life and his sovereignty over all of life to give your best time to the best things in your life. And so the last chance I get to talk to you for a few weeks, Lord willing, get to come back, I'm telling you, you love Jesus, you serve people, you give generously of your time, your treasure, and your talents, because I don't think there's a blessed life apart from giving generously. And there should not be a gospel of people who proclaim Jesus who are not living radically generous with their time, gifts, and talents. So where is God calling you to love him more, serve people more, give more generously? What's that 1 or 2 thing God's calling you to do that for you not to do would be a sin? You work on that, and you ask for God's grace and power and Spirit to give you the wisdom to make a plan, to execute and accomplish it to his glory. You work on that. I'll work on my stuff. I'll see you on the other side.